My name is Candace Haas, and I wanted to thank all of our viewers and customers from the Pharmacy, Pottery, and Natural Healing Center, as well as our friends for joining us from all over the world. Please make sure to hit subscribe and get notified when we post our future cannabis content. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the world of cannabis tourism with Brian Applegarth. Cannabis travel is one of the fastest, most exciting sectors of the travel economy. Here to share information about what that means and how to take advantage of these exciting opportunities, and at the same time, how to support legacy operators, we're joined by Brian Applegarth. Brian Applegarth is an award-winning cannabis travel and tourism innovator. Brian and his team at Applegarth Strategies provide marketing services that support brand management and destination marketing for travelers. His work centers around the cannabis-interested travel audience. Brian's work is data-driven, and he is the sole advisor on the first ever national research on the cannabis travel-motivated travel audience in the United States. He is the founder of the Cannabis Travel Association International and leads the cannabis and hemp work groups for Destination International and the Cannabis Travel Association. He's also the certified cannabis sommelier and a certified cannabis therapy consultant, and has curated the cannabis theme exhibits for the Museum of Sonoma Canopy, the Kelly House Museum of Mendocino, and has co-produced the Cannabis Awards exhibit at the California State Fair. Brian is humble, but he's leading the entire field of the cannabis industry as far as cannabis tourism, and is a sought-after speaker, and we're very lucky to have him with us today to share some amazing insights in the burgeoning world of cannabis travel. Thank you so much for being with us, Brian, and thank you so much for being patient with me and letting me share your bio again. I'll make sure to cut that out in our final version. And thank you so much, and I'm so looking forward to the information that you have to share with us today.
Totally. And thanks, Candace. That was a nice intro, a long intro. I appreciate that. That's nice. I'm really excited to be here. Cannabis travel and tourism is a really exciting space. So everybody just kind of relax. We're going to walk through some information up front, and we're going to take a look at how exciting the cannabis travel and tourism trend is today, and what's happening in the most mature destinations. And I'm hoping that you guys can learn about a lot of experiences here that you might incorporate into your travels in the year ahead. So with that, let's jump in. Again, feel free to drop in questions into the chat. I'm happy to tackle those toward the back half of this presentation and this segment on cannabis travel and tourism. Okay. So first off, just a disclaimer up front, obviously I'm not an attorney. I'm not a doctor. I am a passionate educator about the cannabis plant and cannabis travel and tourism, but this isn't meant to be any advice of any kind. So please consult your physician or your attorney if you plan on doing anything else. And when you do travel across state lines or federal boundaries, country to country, you need to be very aware of what's compliant and not compliant when it comes to what you're carrying with you. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So first off, let's talk a little bit about history. Stating the obvious, I think, cannabis has been around a long time. It's an ancient medicine plant. And it grew wild originally, and humans eventually cultivated the plant for food, medicine, fiber, fuel, also spiritual purposes, which is a really interesting discussion we're going to jump into. And this has been happening for over 12,000 years. The earliest written documentation of cannabis was discovered in ancient China. And it shows that the ancient records were discovered, and it recommended cannabis as a treatment for over 100 medical conditions. So let's take a look at the world migration of cannabis, and then we're going to talk about kind of how travel has been part of the story of cannabis since the beginning, as well as the coevolution of cannabis and human, and the relationship between the two, the human relationship with the plant. So when you go ahead and look at the world migration of cannabis, it first spread across China and India, then to Persia, Egypt, and eventually Greece. And it first appeared in the Western Hemisphere during the colonization of the Americas in the 1600s. Again, the cannabis plant is very flexible. So everything from fibers to rope to paper to clothing. And by the early 1900s, nearly every major pharmacy in the US was offering medical cannabis tinctures for patients. And so cannabis really had a medical presence prior to prohibition that came in 1937. We're going to look at a little bit of history, and then we're going to talk about travel and cannabis through the lens of the Silk Road through the lens of the hippie trail and through the lens of medical travel when cannabis was re-legalized as a medicine. So once again, we see that cannabis had a presence in China. It was identified in the first text and copy of the Pharmacopoeia, and it pointed to cannabis as a medical application. Also in Egypt in 2013 BC, approximately, they have found cannabis pollen inside of mummies and different artifacts in Egyptian culture, showing that cannabis had a presence there as well. Also in India, you see cannabis deeply ingrained in India as part of the history with these kind of spiritual practices. And there's actually a type of beverage called bhang that was drank and is still drank in India that is essentially a cannabis-infused tea. And it's part of the culture, and cannabis is very deeply embedded in India culture today. Also in Africa, they found some artifacts of some of the first pipes in Africa. So you have it tracked back there. And then, of course, with the colonization of the Americas, you have Jamestown from 1492 to 1619, where cannabis starts showing up in the form of rope and crops, and becomes a fiber export. And then there's also, of course, the history of, hemp being the fiber that was used for one of the early flags, as well as hemp paper the Constitution was written on. So hemp has a lot of presence prior. Of course, in 1850, the United States added cannabis to the U.S. medical pharmacopoeia. And then as we move forward, of course, reefer madness propaganda starts setting in. And then in 1937, cannabis becomes prohibited. So I think it's really important to understand the history of cannabis as a plant on Earth and what that relationship has been with humans and the coevolutionary journey that is. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a second. The first real travel story for me for cannabis comes down to the Silk Road history of cannabis. And the Silk Road played a significant role in really the dissemination of cannabis across different regions. The Silk Road was not one single route, but it was a network of trade routes that connected the East and West. And it was a place where people facilitated the exchanging or the trading of goods, ideas, and cultures between Asia, Europe, and Africa. And a lot of these people would carry cannabis seeds with them. That was part of the scene. And that's when cannabis started spreading from its original landrace regions. And I want to pause there for a second and talk a little bit about what the landrace cultivars are and why it matters. Cannabis grew wild, and it grew very different, whether it was near the equator, like in Thailand or India, or if it grew up in the mountains. So what happened was, because the climates were so different, you had different types of cannabis plants that grew in different ways. A few of the original cultivars, or a few of the original types of cannabis that grew wild in nature before they were actually cultivated by humans, are Afghan Kush, which originated from the Hindu Kush mountain range in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this cultivar is known for its resilience and its heavy resin production. And it's used a lot in breeding projects. And the effects lean toward more relaxation. Some people may use the word indica, but really this grew up in the Kush Mountains. So it was in colder climates, shorter, fatter bushes, broader leaves, and the therapeutic compounds that grew in the Afghan Kush varietal or cultivar is unique to that specific region. You also had Thai cannabis coming out of Thailand. This was more uplifting, energetic. This was closer to the equator. The leaves on these plants were thinner. They were narrow leaves, and it's known for more energetic and uplifting and cerebral effects. And it produces long, slender buds instead of thick ones. Other landrace original strains that grew wild are Durban Poison, Hindu Kush, which comes from that specific area. Again, the border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan. You have Malawi Gold, which is in southeastern Africa, known for euphoric effects and a sweet, fruity flavor. You also have Colombian Gold, as well as Panama Red. Now notice that all of these cannabis cultivars have names of destinations, right? Whether it's Panama, Colombia, Malawi, Hindu, Durban Poison, and Durban is a city in South Africa, or the region of South Africa. So it's really interesting when you start thinking about, this is cannabis in its purest natural form as it grew wild. All right, so imagine these different types growing around the world in different cultures, different places. And then you have the Silk Road, where people start traveling the Silk Road, and it's a network of trade. And the golden age of Silk Road travel spanned from around the 2nd century BCE to the 14th century CE. And it's important to note that the Silk Road was not a static entity, but rather a network of trade routes that evolved over time. And they kept shifting due to political, economic, and cultural changes. So the use of cannabis along the Silk Road, it really varied depending on the cultural practices and the beliefs of the societies that it traveled through. Some regions valued cannabis for its medicinal properties. Others used it as a remedy for ailments. In others, it was used more recreationally as a lubricant, or it could be used very ceremonially and ritually as a tool to connect with the divine. And one notable aspect along the Silk Road was, of course, that spiritual practice. And in parts of Central Asia and India, there's a long history there. And cannabis can be connected back to supporting with meditation and prayer and these kind of rituals that existed. So that's travel case number 1, where we first see cannabis spreading around the world. Travel case number 2 is the hippie trail, where that's really about collecting seeds and also the intersection of culture. So let's talk about the hippie trail for a second. The hippie trail, the origins of the hippie trail can actually be traced back to the Beat generation, like with Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg in the 1940s and 1950s. And these authors, you may have heard of the book On the Road, and it really romanticized travel and adventure and nonconformity and alternative lifestyles. And it was, the hippie trail became a travel phenomenon that was launched in the 1940s, 1950s, starting with the beatniks and the Beat generation, and carrying through to the hippies, as well as the Back to the Land movement that happened. Now, the early exploration of the hippie trail were really people taking overland routes and exploring Asia. And one of the earliest routes was the Magic Bus Route, organized by a certain company that took people from London to Kathmandu. And then in the 1960s, the hippie trail expanded, and it saw a surge in interest in Eastern spirituality, mysticism. And again, this was Western youth mostly traveling the hippie trail. And it was usually defined by a bohemian trip, cheap transportation, a communal approach, and the goal of breaking free from societal norms. Now, why it gets interesting is because the hippie trail became a trail where people would visit different regions and collect cannabis seeds and bring them back to Northern California. This is one of the reasons that Northern California and the Emerald Triangle are such interesting destinations today, because there's so many seeds that were collected and brought back. So the genetics banks, increasingly Humboldt, Mendocino, and the Emerald Triangle is becoming known as the Amazon of cannabis genetics, where there's a lot of different types of cannabis that are very special in that region. Okay, so what are the countries that the hippie trail went through? It went through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan before reaching India and Nepal. And then along the way, you would stop in cities like Istanbul and Tehran and Kabul and Kathmandu, and you would immerse yourself in local culture, spirituality, communal living, and cannabis was often at the center of it in certain ways. Of course, the values were very much peace, love, and freedom, reflected the beatnik, the hippie, and the Back to the Land values. And this was really an important time from the 1950s to really the late 1970s. It was the heyday or the golden era of the hippie trail. So that's the second big travel story. You have the Silk Road trading, you have the hippie trail, which leads to the genetic banks of the Emerald Triangle. And then the other case study is what happened in the Bay Area and other LGBTQ communities with the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. And what happened was, the HIV/AIDS epidemic, there was no medicine that was helping the patients, the people who were affected with HIV/AIDS. And one of the major ailments was wasting syndrome, where people couldn't eat and they would basically waste away, become a human skeleton. And it was an absolute horrific time for that community, those communities, the queer communities. And in response to the AIDS crisis, you had a pioneer named Dennis Perron, who was a gay man in the Castro Vietnam vet. And he's known today as the godfather of medical cannabis or medical marijuana. And him and Brownie Mary advocated and organized the gay community to basically create change and re-legalize cannabis as medicine in 1996. So the AIDS crisis of the 80s led to the legalization of medical cannabis in 1996. And that triggered another travel phenomenon, which was medical travel. Because when they legalized medical cannabis in California, shortly thereafter, you had labs testing medicine to make sure it was safe. And it had no mold, it had no toxins, that it was pure cannabis, and it was healthy and able to be consumed with confidence from people who were sick. So you had medical travel happen through the late 90s and really up through where we are today, which is adult use or leisure travel. When it went adult use legal, anybody 21 and up can purchase and consume cannabis for leisure recreational purposes, different than medical. And this really triggered the era of leisure cannabis travel today. Of course, there's a couple outliers. You had Amsterdam, you had a sweet spot in Switzerland for a moment. But even those were quasi-legal. To have the legal landscape today for recreational cannabis in destinations like California, you're seeing incredible innovation. And we're going to look at a lot of those case studies today. So I wanted to give you those 3 different case studies on how cannabis has been part of the travel discussion. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit. Here are some pictures of the broadleaf and narrowleaf cultivars. Again, the narrowleaf cultivars grow closer to the equator. Broadleaf cultivars grow higher up in the mountains at higher elevations. And these plants have different therapeutic compounds that work in different ways. Here are some pictures of the landrace cultivars that I mentioned before. You see the different types of varietals or the different kinds and how they present themselves. Cannabis is a flowering plant. It's a seed, it grows, it's vegetative, and it's an amazingly sophisticated plant and highly evolved plant where it can serve as a medicine. It can also serve in the capacity of regenerative and sustainable products. It also has that very interesting THC molecule that gives you the euphoric feeling of being high, whether that's a microdose effect or whether that is a flow state effect or whether that is a journey effect. And those are different levels of what we call entheogenic effects, where you feel those very unique effects that cannabis provide. And those effects can be different from cultivar to cultivar, right? So the Hindu Kush is going to feel different from the equatorial strains out of Thailand, for example, because they grew in different regions. So they express themselves differently and the effects are different. So it's really a whole new world when we're looking at cannabis as an enhancement tool. So let's talk a little bit about the cannabinoids, and then we're going to get back into the travel discussion. You have different types of cannabinoids, which are therapeutic compounds. A lot of us are aware of THC and CBD. There's also, of course, CBN and THCV and CBG and CBD. And there's there's hundreds of different compounds, as well as terpenes. So if you're thinking of THC as the effect-inducing molecule, and that is, let's just say that's the pedal. Do you want to go slow and just have a very light journey? Or do you want to go and have a more kind of psychoactive and a kind of a higher dose of THC? And then that's like how strong the effects are going to be. And the terpenes are kind of the wheels, right? So you have the terpenes essentially are essential oils, and they help guide your effects. Now, why this matters in travel is travelers are starting to use cannabis as a pairing tool with travel activities. And it's becoming known as effect pairing. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But basically, here's an example. If you're going to a Michelin star meal in San Francisco, there is a specific type of cannabis that you can either smoke or drink or eat that is going to be a great precursor to that Michelin star meal, because it's going to stimulate your appetite, it's going to accentuate your palate, and it's going to enhance the experience. There's other cultivars that make shapes and colors more vibrant and more specific and more interesting. There's certain cultivars that make art more thought-provoking. And people are looking at cannabis as a tool to pair with art experiences while on vacation. And it all ties back into the terpene profiles of the cultivar or the product and how much THC is in it, right? So very intentional. So what is, real quick, the way that these therapeutic compounds work with the human body is we have receptors that communicate with the therapeutic compounds, the cannabinoids and those terpenes within cannabis. So those therapeutic compounds have an entourage effect, and there's a communication that happens between different receptors in the human body, specifically CB1 and CB2. So when we take the plant, it turns up the endocannabinoid system that we all have inside of us. And cannabis works, we co-evolved with the plant. So the receptors that we have in our bodies work very closely with the cannabis plant therapeutic compounds, because up until less than 100 years ago, humans around the world used cannabis regularly. And then it was removed with prohibition. So now there's a re-education happening with science and data supporting this next era of legal cannabis. So the primary purpose of your endocannabinoid system is to facilitate balance in your body, homeostasis. So when you take cannabis, those molecules want to help bring you back into optimal balance or optimal health. And that's the endocannabinoid system that works directly with the hemp and cannabis plant is really known as the master modulator. It tells your skeletal system, your immune system, your reproductive system. It communicates with your other systems to either turn that function up or turn that function down, and tries to address different ailments in your body to bring you back into balance. This is why cannabis is both a medical travel trend as well as a leisure travel trend today. It also should be noted that without the cannabis plant or without the hemp plant, totally aside, our endocannabinoid systems are fully functioning systems, and we internally produce endogenous cannabinoids. We produce, it's called anandamide and AG2, and these are compound. These are what we produce, these endogenous cannabinoids, and they dock on these receptors. When you ingest the plant, you're taking in phytocannabinoids, which is plant-based cannabinoids, which also have the capability to communicate with these receptors throughout your body. So anyways, a little heavy on the science, but I think it's really important to know how cannabis works and why it's also medical travel. Of course, we have different consumption methods. There's a lot of options from topicals. And here are some of the effects, right? When we talk about that special effect, we have the CBD products, We have the microdosing with the THC in small doses. We have flow state, which is kind of an optimal state where time and space dissolve and you feel incredibly present in the moment. I believe that this is a really nice place to be for people that really want to have cannabis enhanced travel experiences. The flow state is a really specific zone, and it's a special place to be and to enhance your senses for different activities and experiences. And then, of course, there's journeying. And this, you may have heard of the ayahuasca tourism and some of these other kind of entheogenic tourism products in Peru, et cetera, or Mexico. And journeying is very medicinal, spiritually and emotionally. And it allows you to work through your spiritual health and your emotional health with higher doses of this type of effect. Oftentimes you work with a shaman or a guide or a doctor. They do now have people that are certified, that are basically experts in supporting a journey. And again, this, in a lot of ways, this could either be medical or it could be recreational, So it's cannabis kind of really pushes our boundaries of words because it's a highly evolved plant, and that includes in travel. And that spiritual health and wellness is a fascinating space. And again, there are over 400 identifiable therapeutic compounds in cannabis. And just imagine all the different types of cannabis, right? Like the Chardonnay grapes versus the Cabernet grapes, versus the Pinot grapes. You have all different kinds of cannabis flowers that have different types of effects and tastes and aromas. And it's really exciting when you think about cannabis travel. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down. And for this next section, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to walk through some travel stories, starting with explaining this concept of effect pairing. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So effect pairing cannabis is the new travel trend. And what is that? Well, as food pairs with wine, cannabis pairs with activities and experiences. And to effect pair cannabis, it's the art of optimally enhancing an activity or experience with cannabis effects. Now, there's some key concepts. There's obviously your consumption options. Do you want to smoke? Do you want to drink? Do you want to take a gummy? Do you want to have an edible? Do you want to have a topical? Do you want to take a tincture, etc.? So knowing as a consumer, what's your preference, knowing about full spectrum medicine, which is cannabis products that have a wide spectrum. It's holistic healing instead of isolated product formulations. You want to have all the good medicine working synergistically together. So that full spectrum, I would recommend, and that's part of this effect pairing, is looking for those full spectrum effects because they're very different than isolate and lab created formulations. You want to think about your mindset and setting. This is a very important concept when it comes to the THC molecule. You want to think about what is your mindset going into it? How are you maybe utilizing cannabis as a tool for the setting you're walking into? Are you going to a concert? Are you going to a dinner? Are you going to an art gallery? Are you going to go on a nature hike? There are very specific cannabis cultivars and products that pair with those travel activities. You have the journey we spoke about, activated THC. Of course, we covered off on terpenes. We talked about microdose state. We talked about flow state. Another interesting concept is targeted sensory enhancement. So with cannabis effect pairing, you're looking to basically facilitate sensory enhancement that's targeted. Are you going to be amplifying your flavor, taste, and texture and stimulating your appetite? Or are you going to be looking to accentuate colors and shapes and have a more thought-provoking experience with art? So being able to have this intention is really powerful when it comes to effect pairing cannabis. And then you have your cannabis classifications and your activity categories. So the three core tentpoles of effect pairing are food, art, and nature. And the cannabis classifications that you're going to be looking into are fuel, floral, and citrus fruit. right? So some cannabis flowers smell like fuel. That's also known as a myrcene terpene profile. Also, sour diesel is one of these, right? You'll hear these, and now those are really known for, yet again, being an appetite stimulant. So a great pairing with food. You have floral cultivars that tend to be a little bit more lean toward art effects, pairing with art effects. And then, of course, you have citrus fruit and nature. So if you have a cultivar that has a very strong lemony smell, for example, or tangy, that's a great strain typically to consider pairing with an outdoor hike in the redwoods or doing something that's a little more active and outdoorsy. So it could be more energetic, a little more uplifting. Of course, cannabis is very bespoke to every consumer, but the science is increasingly showing a dotted line between these effects and specifically these travel activities. This is a step-by-step pairing guide where you can really kind of start working with the effect pairing method as you travel. And remember the tips. You got to always consume with mindfulness and intention. With any entheogenic product, especially the one you're using THC, you want to be intentional about why you're using it and what is the mindset and setting. You want to go low and go slow, specifically with edibles and beverages, because sometimes the effects take a long time to settle in. You don't want to ruin your trip. So start low with the THC and go very slow and incrementally use it as needed, but give it at least 2 hours for the effects to settle in before taking more. Creative thinking, laughter, right? Appreciate stimulation. All these are common effects. You want to stay hydrated. You want to travel safely and take a ride share. And you really want to embrace the ebb and flow and feel okay with getting lost in time and conversation. Sometime you'll even lose track of the conversation. And that is a signature and should be a funny, fun moment. That's okay. It's part of the cannabis travel experience. All right, now we're going to look at some of the best experiences that are available today. And then we're going to open it up for questions here and pass it back over to Candice to have some conversation with the audience. So first off, a bed and breakfast. Now there are definitely websites like Bed and Breakfast that have cannabis-friendly lodging options where you can explore the world, you can pick your destination, and you can find accommodations. Another great website is indica.com. That has different places to stay and gather and play and explore. It's a cannabis travel marketplace. Also on the Indica website, you can find a travel guide to the famous Emerald Triangle region. And this is written by the Ganja Traveler. And it's the Ganja Traveler's Guide to the Emerald Triangle, which gives you different itineraries going through Mendocino County, going through Humboldt County, Southern Humboldt and Northern Humboldt up to Bigfoot country. And it gives you all the information you need to have a really great trip in cannabis legacy country in Northern California. My opinion is this is maybe the best cannabis tour in the world. And it's Humboldt Cannabis Tours. I've done this tour a few times and it's amazing. It's the future of cannabis travel. And you get to visit different types of farms. And the guide, Matt, and his team are amazing tour guides. And you don't have to worry about driving. You have lunch in the redwoods. Sometimes you visit a dry farming farm where, there's different types of craft cultivation outdoors and you enjoy all the beauty. So consider Humboldt Cannabis Tours. I would highly recommend. You have the Cannabis Trail, which now exists. And the Cannabis Trail is a 9-county trail that travels through Northern California. It's free. It's self-guided. They're launching an app in the next 3 months where you can actually travel the trail in a gamified way. And you learn about the cultural stories of the cannabis legalization movement. You'll notice that it starts in Santa Cruz. It goes all the way up to Trinity County. Up here's the Emerald Triangle. And when you travel the trail, you visit cannabis farms, the most travel-worthy shops, the most interesting lounges, indoor and outdoor. And you get to see the future or the present of the most special cannabis travel experiences in Northern California. And you also get to learn about the pioneers, the places, and the significant moments and how cannabis has influenced California culture. Notice that it includes beatniks, hippies, back to the land. It also highlights the Castro and the queer community, about the history there. Of course, it highlights craft cultivation. It talks a lot about cannabis under prohibition with bootlegger and prohibition stories. So it's really something to check out and consider. You also have the Oakland leg of the Cannabis Trail. And Oakland basically expanded their trail to where it includes all kinds of things, including effect pairing. So you can not just travel the trail, and here's some video that you could see of the experience, but you can also look at the Cannabis Trail map that, really outlines not just stops on the trail, but also has these effect pairings, the nature effect pairings, the art effect pairings, and the events and attractions that are all, celebrate cannabis as a travel experience, not just in lounges and shops, but outside of that too. Of course, you have your cultural heritage landmarks too. So it's really exciting that this continues to come together. You have cannabis events like the Emerald Cup. This is actually happening in Oakland as well. This is happening in August this year. And it's a 20-year anniversary of a cannabis cultural festival that any cannabis enthusiast or actually any well-traveled person who likes having new experiences would have a great time at the Emerald Cup. It's got music, it's got great food, it's got, of course, cannabis, it's got art. It has an award. It's considered the Academy Awards of Cannabis, most highly respected awards. So the Emerald Cup is a very special event to consider. You have companies like Canescape that are curating cannabis overnight dining experiences, retreats where you're glamping in tents and you're having amazing multi-coursed meals with cannabis sommeliers. So these two are in Sonoma as well as up in Mendocino County. They are offering a 420 getaway package. If you haven't made plans yet, this is a great option. They've also partnered with an experience called the Skunk Train, where you literally ride a train into the redwoods and you get out and have a cannabis party. And Canescape is partnered with them on the 420 weekend. It's a really cool event. You also have the Ganja. This is the cannabis sommelier. This has been alive and certifications have been being earned for about 2 years. And this is the globally leading cannabis sommelier credential, basically. It's an amazing experience. There's all different kinds of ganjiers. Some of them are more passionate about flowers. Some are more passionate about concentrates. Some are passionate about the cultural history. And some are a mix of different types of that. Some love beverages. Some love all the above. So you can look into the ganjier and ask if there's any kind of cannabis sommeliers in your area. And you can reach out to them and schedule and maybe have a party at your house where you invite in a ganjier and ask them to create a cannabis experience for you. Or you could do it while traveling, of course. Cannabis lounges, there's about 70 cannabis lounges in California today. And it is a really exciting space. West Hollywood is one of the coolest destinations for this. This is literally photos of the lounge, this Zen garden right here. You have little nooks and cubbies with curtains and tables, and you sit around a pond with koi fish and parrots and statues, and you can ingest cannabis in a beautiful setting. This picture right here is their dispensary. This is actually a cannabis dispensary and shop that's owned by Woody Harrelson, the actor. And again, this is the California cannabis lounge scene is, I like to talk about kind of how it's Amsterdam next level, the California way. A little bit different polish, a different experience. Californians are known to be innovative. And West Hollywood's got some killer experiences. Here's another lounge. This is called the Artistry. This area right here is an outdoor patio where you can smoke weed and look over on the street. I believe this is Santa Monica Boulevard right here. So you
Cool.
can literally consume cannabis in the cafe, at the bar, or in the outdoor lounge. And then you can go for a walk and grab some dinner in West Hollywood somewhere, or go to an art gallery. So the artistry is a fantastic option as well. It's walking distance from the woods. And there's 2 other lounges in West Hollywood that are super cool. Another form of a cannabis lounge is a cannabis spa. And there is a cannabis spa lounge up in Humboldt where the entire model is spa services.
Mm-hmm.
And you procure your cannabis depending on which spa service you chose. And it is a topical experience that's all very wellness heavy. And this is where it gets so exciting with cannabis. Yes, you're going to have beverage bars. Yes, you're going to have smoking lounges and vaping lounges and patios and indoor and outdoor lounges. There's a lot of stages in these lounges that are programmed with music and speakers and education. You're also going to have spas, and you're also going to have infused culinary dinners like with Canescape and what they offer. So all of these are really exciting travel experiences today. Santa Ana has got a really great cannabis scene. They have a lot of shops where you can travel around. There's actually a travel guide to Santa Ana that you could check out. Something else that's worth mentioning is they are starting to work toward and be close to launching the cannabis appellations of California, just like wine ABAs. And this is it's funny, I believe this is the next story that builds on those landrace strains, right? Where cannabis grew wild. Now you're going to have a refocus on where was it grown? Who was the grower? How did they grow it? Why is this cannabis special? And you're going to know, just like you meet the winemaker, you're going to meet the cannabis grower. And that's going to become part of travel. Just like champagne in France, right? They make champagne. They're famous for it. It's part of tourism. Cannabis is going to have the same thing happen in California. It's going to have the same thing happen in Thailand. It's going to have the same thing happen in India, Pakistan. You're going to start seeing the agricultural regions have these appellation of origin designations. And then you're going to really be able to get nerdy and talk about the craft and meet the farmers and really understand how special this plant is and why it's not just growing something that gets you high. It's growing medicine, and it's holistic healing medicine. It's mind, body, and spirit, because this plant is super ancient and super evolved, and humans co-evolved with it. So watching this come alive in travel is going to be just awesome. And it's really getting there because now we have all these experiences that I'm walking you through. Another great product that I love in travel is the Sunstone Spritz. It's a great beverage. It's out of Santa Barbara County. They also have really great gummies, and they have a Sunstone Splash. And it really is the future. I think that this brand definitely embodies the cannabis tourism brand of California today. And it's a Southern California story. It's in wine country. And it's just a beautiful experience. They also have award-winning wines. So it's exciting to see these brands that are crossing over from vineyards and wine into cannabis. And last but not least, the Bohemian Chemist up in Mendocino County is bar none one of the best getaways that you could plan. And you can literally stay there for 3 days and just hang out if you wanted to. They have a cannabis lounge. They have a cannabis apothecary. They have amazing products. They have landrace strains from Africa that they grow. They're really nerdy about their cultivation in their local terroir in Anderson Valley. And they're incredible storytellers. This is a shot of the garden. The country is beautiful. They also have a restaurant and a wine tasting room on site. They have a membership club. So, they also are a stop on the Cannabis Trail because they're a multi-generational legacy farm. So they have a Cannabis Trail cultural landmark, as you can see in this photo right here. So if it pulls up, and it might not. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed that. That's some examples of cannabis travel and tourism today, and where we stand and things that you should be or could be considering for your next trip. So with that, I'll hand it back to Candace.
Yeah, that was such great information. I thank you so much for sharing that. You shared so many cool spots that our watchers could go and visit this year, this 420. So many great spots that I even want to go check out. And I loved the information that you shared in the beginning too. The history of the international Silk Road, the travel that the cannabis, the history of the Cannabis Trail there, and even like the medical travel that the history there. Because I really didn't think about it, but my career really started in cannabis within the doctor's office, and we really did have people traveling because there was very few doctors in the early days, and we did have people traveling 5-6 hours, staying overnight to come see the doctor. So there really was cannabis travel, even the very beginning days of Prop 215. I didn't really think about it. And that even continues today. So I love that you pointed that out. So that was very interesting. And people really were interested in that as well. And so that brought me to think too. So when do you think that we'll have, other foreign countries becoming involved in this international cannabis scene? I know that we have, cannabis travel like in Amsterdam that's been going on, for many years. But when do you think that we'll have South Africa involved in travel, because they have some of these land race strains that you brought up. So when do you think that might become something for, other international countries, foreign countries?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been working in cannabis travel and tourism since 2013. And, having been the founder of the Cannabis Travel Association, which is an international organization, I've had the privilege of kind of getting to know people around the world that are starting to kind of lead in their destinations. The modern day cannabis travel discussion. So right now in Barcelona, there is a very vibrant private lounge club scene. It's going through a few growing pains right now, but it's very vibrant and it very much exists. A lot of people look at Barcelona as kind of the new destination that's competing with Amsterdam.
Yeah, like Spannabis and everything.
Exactly. They have the Spannabis Festival. You also just have a lot of history in Barcelona and Spain. And that the community, the cannabis communities, the legacy communities are very closely connected to the people in Amsterdam as well as the US. There's a lot of brain trust in those destinations when it comes to cannabis. And that comes in the form of cannabis travel and tourism. You also have some people in Jamaica doing some really great things. There's the Jamaican Cup. You got Bob Marley's got a house, he's got a whole museum out there dedicated to him now. Of course, he always considered cannabis as a sacrament. And that's fascinating. That Rastafari, the villages, the Rastafari villages in South Africa, that was one of my favorite travel experiences, was visiting a Rastafari village in a South African township. And I hung out for a couple days there, and it's part of the culture, right? Because it's embedded, and it's all about kind of the sacredness of cannabis, as a tool in that way. So you also have Germany just legalized. I think that is really important because they took a step forward toward legalization that actually happened yesterday. That was a big global milestone for Europe, the European region. Germany kind of leads as far as where the future's headed. And they have a huge travel economy. And I believe that cracked the door open for this new leisure travel discussion. And we'll see how that grows over there. You also had Thailand had a scene coming on strong. They're starting to reel it back because it grew a little too fast, it sounds like, and they were attracting the wrong kind of people that were investing in the industry. So there's been some reversing there. But cannabis is embedded in Thai culture and history. Plant medicine is part of that story of that country. And you're going to see cannabis, I believe, in Thailand ultimately come alive with cannabis appellations. And it might be really interesting if it leans more toward that medical narrative, because even when they formed the cannabis appellations of California, yes, they looked at Bordeaux. Yes, they're looking at Champagne. They also looked at Manuka honey out of New Zealand because of the medicinal properties and what that means for a product that has that kind of capability. And that just shows that difference between cannabis and wine, for example. You have this incredible medicine that's getting looked at through an Appalachian lens in that way. So I think Thailand's going to have that soon, or sooner than later, next, hopefully maybe 4 years out around those appellations. Of course, you have Canada, and I've worked with some clients up in Canada. Definitely some tour companies, people are looking at this. You have the Kootenai Rocky region where BC Bud is from, right? This legacy producing region that already has the brand cachet of BC Bud. So they're like, how do we now position this today for travelers like the ones in this webinar that want to come access really special experiences? I also just got in touch with a guy who's starting to do trips in Pakistan and Nepal and India, taking people to the villages where they still grow cannabis and they have for generations. And it's part of the culture of these small rural villages in these very remote areas that are part of that land race where cannabis grew wild type story. So we're currently looking at potentially doing something together in the next couple of years, and I'm very excited about that. Of course, Amsterdam. I would like to see Amsterdam take more of a step toward the wellness side. I am going to go there this year to check it out. But last time I was there, it was very smoking, recreational heavy. I think that the future of cannabis travel is going to be bending it back toward where it should be to represent the plant in the best way, which is a tool for well-being, wellness, and balance with 1 foot in medical, 1 foot in leisure. And it really is the truth. So being able to build an industry that allows the space for a plant to express itself from an experience point of view for travelers in that way is really, really important. And but I think Amsterdam, Prague is another one. I went to Cannabis out in Prague about 4 years ago. And if anyone's out there, first off, Prague's amazing. Secondly, this Cannafest has been going on for years, and you should see how special this event is. They literally have sections for kids where they could be weaving hemp mats and creating products. And, they have walls of people with pictures telling why they use cannabis. And they have amazing relaxation areas and programming and music. It's very kind of Emerald Cup-esque over in the beautiful destination of Prague. So those are the few of the destinations from an international lens that I would keep an eye on.
That's really cool. I love to do that. Come to think about it, there's more places that I would have imagined. So that's really exciting. I know that I've actually been to Bob Marley's birthplace in Mausoleum, and they very much incorporate cannabis into that whole tour. I know that we both have a good friend, Keiko, that has Coral Cove Wellness Resort in Jamaica. So that's another wonderful place to check out. So lots of great places for people to go and to experience cannabis. And like one of the questions from our audience was, do these facilities also allow foreigners to purchase cannabis? And so I would also assume that would be a yes, as long as people are adults in all of these countries that you mentioned.
I think it's case by case, and things shift so rapidly that, policy is very dynamic, right? So the legalization puzzle is like literally dominoes are falling into place like week over week, month over month.
Like check with your local laws and regulations, like as you travel and as time kind of progresses.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that you're especially know what the lay of the land is before you go. Work with your tour guide. And you want to buy the exciting part about being able to buy cannabis today from a legal licensed shop and lounge or consumption space, as I like to say. Oh, by the way, Santa Ana, they have a sampling room coming on board, which is kind of like cannabis tasting rooms. So that's not far off. Santa Ana should keep an eye on that. Those are going to be the very first cannabis sampling tasting rooms in the world. They're very much built for that experience. So that's going to be fun to watch. Very
cool. So you mentioned a little bit about the International Cannabis Travel Association. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was started in 2017. The vision from Go was really advocacy, education, and networking, and being the united voice of cannabis tourism and travel, and to serve as a vehicle of normalization and education and data. We have an annual data report that tells all about the cannabis travel and tourism trend. It leans pretty heavy into the consumer mindset. There's also a lot of membership tiers. There's a few where you can choose a different membership tier and become a member. It's a member-based nonprofit. We encourage anybody who wants to learn more to go to the cannabis-travelassociation.org, and you can poke around. One of the big things we do every year, besides a data report, is we host an event called the Cannabis Travel World Fair. And that's actually happening in May. So I want to invite all of you, if you're interested, to join us we're going to have 2 days of programming. We're going to be bringing in people from around the world. I think we have representation from, over 15 countries. And these are people that are leading tours, that are opening shops, that are thinking in terms of the visitor economy or the cannabis travel audience, not just residents. So it continues to really grow. And I'm really proud that it still exists. And we made it through COVID and all the things in the last few years. So we have an amazing board of directors leading that. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So that's the Cannabis Travel Association.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I definitely encourage people, if you have any kind of business or interest that like touches that, to get involved, because it's really important to support nonprofits that are advancing those kind of interests. So that's really cool. So kind of like speaking of that, we Pharmacy Natural Healing Center Pottery are working with this really cool group called High B&B. So are you familiar with them? And can you tell our audience about High B&B and maybe some tips for cannabis travelers that are staying in hotels?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with High B&B.
I can start with that. High B&B is it's similar to Airbnb. So it's a booking service that works with owners of rental properties that are cannabis friendly. So it's just pretty similar to Airbnb, but they allow cannabis use. And so it's a smaller platform. Just go to High B&B. So then if you want to maybe just talk about travel tips for cannabis consumers staying in hotels.
Yeah. So the hotel is a really interesting space. Cannabis friendly hotels, in the work that I do and what I've seen in the market, is you have different types of models. Some people allow you to smoke anywhere on property, and that it might be a very beautiful high-end place, by the way. You're seeing some really cool establishments embracing cannabis, looking at it as something totally different than cigarette smoke, because it is. And they're allowing you to ingest indoors, outdoors, anywhere on property. There's other places where they have a cannabis delivery menu that is kind of a list of 10 products, where it's the hotel approved products. And it has beverages, and it has beautiful chocolates that are locally made. And it uplifts brands that have a story, that are part of the community there. And sometimes they don't include smoking, but maybe they do include vaping. So really, I'm seeing hotels create whatever model they feel is correct for their brand and their audience. And again, the Bud and Breakfast and Indica are the two that I'm aware of. It sounds like High B&B is a similar one, but being able to understand which hotel you're staying at and what the rules are, and making that so it's normalized, right? And we've seen this before. I sometimes point to a couple other travel case studies, which I call marginalized travel, that happened in history. One of those was the Green Book. It was safe spaces for African Americans to travel and feel welcome. You also had a guide in the LGBTQ community called the Damron's Guide, and that started in the 1970s. And it was safe spaces for the queer community, where you could check into a hotel and get one bed and not feel like you were threatened or unsafe. I believe that this conversation we're having right now about hotels, there is stigma still around smoking. So if you want to give your money and support businesses that are inclusive, and that may not be smoking in your room, but maybe they have a dedicated spot on site where they can direct you, where you can hang out and meet some people over some delicious, locally grown weed. And that's very real. So take time to find the hotels that are supporting this travel trend and select the one that fits you.
I love that. And I'm definitely going to be connecting you with the High B&B people so they can join that International Cannabis Travel Association, because they're definitely missing out, because it's be a good synergy for the two of you guys. But yeah, that definitely find out, if your hotel that you're staying at has something really cool like that, definitely take advantage. And if they do have like a safe space for you to smoke in, or some sort of, carve out for you, definitely take advantage of that, because you definitely want to avoid any kind of smoking fees or inconveniences on your wonderful trip. Definitely, go that route. So I know that you work with municipalities to set up travel destination programs that include cannabis travel. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to shout some of those out. So do you want to mention some of those programs that you put together?
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Yeah. So, my work day to day is with Applegarth Strategies. I have an amazing team.
Mhm.
And we are the agency that basically is leading at this kind of cannabis travel and tourism integration, specifically with marketing for destinations that are tourism destinations. So I've been hired and worked for about 20 destinations to date, including San Francisco travel, visit Greater Palm Springs, visit West Hollywood, visit Mendocino County, visit Humboldt, visit Modesto. It kind of goes on and on. Kootenai Rocky region up in Canada, Hello Burlington in Vermont. So I get brought in by the travel industry, specifically destination organizations, um, to be able to integrate and understand this new era of cannabis travel and why it is a travel trend anchored in wellness and well-being, and how do we create a strategy that fits within the greater destination brand and the greater destination brand pillars, and how do we teach the cannabis stakeholders to understand how to look at their shop not just as a retail shop but as a place of a experience for
Mhm.
visitors to that destination, where you are an attraction, right? You're not just a lounge, you are an attraction that represents the cannabis experience in your destination. And how can we work with, a handful of cannabis businesses that think beyond a resident consumer and BOGO deals and price conscious purchasing all the time? How do we work with that visitor profile where that experience premium, they're willing to pay a premium for that, or travel an extra mile for that, or, while in Rome, indulge. It's this kind of traveler that you're going to throw down for the top shelf blunt while you're in the Emerald Triangle, because you're in the Emerald Triangle. It's like being in Tuscany when you're going wine tasting. You're gonna pull an extra spend out because of that.
Mhm.
So I work to build bridges between the travel industry and the cannabis industry, and my work very much kind of positions me in between those two worlds as kind of a cross-cultural communicator and a data guy that helps to make sense of the cannabis travel audience, and then be able to formulate marketing services and strategies and programs that support the elevation of cannabis within that destination.
That's cool. Yeah, and I've loved working with you and like the work that you've done, like in Santa Ana specifically, in Pharmacy Santa Ana, and all that you've collected. It's been really insightful. I just really lucky that our city, Santa Ana, too, has been so progressive and included cannabis in the travel destination program, because it's been it can be a little scary for some cities because
Mm-hmm.
Santa Ana, Orange County is very conservative. So thank you so much for, working with the city and including cannabis in it. And I feel like they will benefit, and we will help fill those hotel rooms and put together some really exciting, experiences. Like you said, we're going to have our first tasting room, and the lounges will be soon to come. So really exciting. So thank you for sharing that. And then one thing I get asked a lot, and I know people probably get asked this as well, that work in the cannabis space. But we have a lot of people travel, come to the dispensaries, and I get asked a lot. And I don't know if you can answer this, but what types of products, if you're traveling out of state, can you bring across state lines?
Yeah, so state lines, I always err on the side of caution. So when I work with destinations, it's taking the right size bite, and it's making sure that you meet them where they're at, and you err on the side of caution, and you keep everybody safe. Public safety for the visitor, as well as the hospitality industry, the frontline staff, the safety of concierge and all of that is important, as is the visitor. So, as Sage just put in there, hemp is federally legal, right? That being said, it's a very confusing conversation. If you're carrying a hemp product that has activated THC over state lines, and you get the wrong person on the wrong day,
Yeah.
you never know what you're going to walk into. Will it probably pan out where you're fine? Yeah, probably, because you have that hemp federal legalization from the 2018 Farm Bill. But that is a very dynamic space with a lot of confusing information, because cannabis and hemp are the same plant. So it's like just different buckets of the types of cultivars and how much THC they have in it, basically. So I would err on the side of caution. I wouldn't travel across state lines. I would definitely not recommend traveling country to country because that's federal. And we're still in that stage where while you're in the destination, indulge.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring back a souvenir, bring back a stash box where that's empty that you can, put other things in when you get home, whatever those things are, or get a really cool pipe or a piece or a grinder that has the destination on it. Grab it. There's some really cool t-shirts at these shops and lounges that I work with that I look at those, like, remember those Hard Rock Cafe shirts that have like the place you went? Yeah. Like there's people that are now like collecting these as a memento of that cannabis experience on their trip. So think in terms of ancillary products, art, clothing, grinders, pipes, maybe a little stash bag that you can zip up and carry with you. There's different options there. So I would say enjoy the product while in the destination. I would also recommend that people ask for locally made products. I think there's something special about that. It helps round out that local experience for visitors. So yeah, that's what I recommend.
I love that. I love that thought. Do you have magnets of all your different stops on the cannabis road? That'd be kind of cool. And you can collect all the magnets.
Yeah, we're actually building. So that app, so the Cannabis Trail is something that I've been working on for about 5-6 years now. And we're building an app. So we're going to be launching a Cannabis Trail app this year. And it's going to be a gamified app where you can travel the trail and it will tell you stories. You could click on little podcasts, short films, and it will tell you the story of how cannabis has influenced California culture as you visit these cultural landmarks, which are all placed in really cool lounges, shops, and farms and tourist. There's one that's in a tourist information office that celebrates the history of the hemp connection, which was the first hemp store in the US up in Southern Humboldt. It's a really special trail that any seasoned traveler would love, whether they use cannabis or not. They would enjoy that experience 100%.
It's like history buffs would find that stuff really, really cool and interesting. That's really cool.
Yes.
And last question. I know that you were just recently invited to attend and to share some knowledge at one of the really big national or main travel industry conferences. And I think that that's really cool and kind of signifies something really significant in terms of, a change in the overall stigma. What do you think about that in terms of like signifying a change in the stigma of cannabis?
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. There's 2 speaking engagements that I've had, and I've done quite a few, but there's 2 that are recent big milestones. One of those happened last year on it was an international audience of travel industry leadership from across mostly North America, but we had a few people from Japan, Australia, and this is the people who kind of, their goal is to make sure we have a healthy travel economy globally. So the fact that I was able to do a 40-minute presentation that was all about cannabis travel and tourism from a marketing point of view, but also we really got into, what does it mean to think about destination development through cannabis experiences? And, do you use words like consumption space or lounge? Because you can have beverage bars and spas and infused culinary. I think that's going to be part of the magic, is making sure that we have the right words and lexicon to be able to facilitate the most powerful and the most meaningful cannabis travel experience suite around the world, which includes farms, plants. It includes rural regions. It includes amazing lounges and consumption spaces that are in urban areas. It includes stories about equity. It includes really hard stories that are heartbreaking, that like what happened in the Castro with the AIDS epidemic. But think about those travel experiences that you've had. I mean, I think of Dachau and visiting a concentration camp and how transformative that experience was for me. I think of walking through the Anne Frank house or going to Cambodia to where kind of not just Angkor Wat, but the killing fields where the Khmer Rouge, had that genocide, and looking at the aftermath of what that meant. The exciting, fun, playful, magical part of cannabis travel is awesome. As important is the cultural storytelling to make sure that we really do justice to the truth and what happened. So I'm excited about all of it. I think that it really offers something special. And I do think it all if there's three foundational words that cannabis tourism today represents, it's balance, well-being, and wellness. And that is that is the beacon, I think, as a global, like when I think of the Cannabis Travel Association, our job is to continually guide the ship by looking at the plant as a blueprint and representing its capabilities in the most honest way. And that is what it is. It's one leg in medical, one leg in leisure travel. And the plant itself is a plant that's really for wellness, well-being, and balance.
Yeah. Well, those are really strong, profound words to end this on, and very true. I love what you're doing, and I really agree. I think that travel is a really good way to show and to teach people about the history of cannabis, about what it can bring to your life and how it can benefit you, and to kind of like let people feel and to experience this in really deep and profound ways, and to let them enjoy it and to learn. So thank you so much I think this has been a really enriching and educational webinar. I think people have learned so much, and I really thank you for sharing all this knowledge. I've really enjoyed this webinar today and everything that you've brought to us today. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, and Candace, thank you for allowing a platform to share about all this. If we can't share about it, people won't know about it. So I thank you so much to you and Pharmacy and the whole organization for making space for this to be part of the series. And I want to thank everybody who attended. I did just drop my website into the chat. You can contact me through there. I do see everything that comes through that. So don't hesitate. Also, my LinkedIn, I'm constantly posting about travel trends and data and case studies and weighing in on different cultural moments and articles, all related to cannabis travel and tourism. And again, the cannabis travel audience in the United States, which as of July last year accounts for about 72 million Americans. It is a significant audience, and destinations in the travel industry are taking note, and cannabis businesses and brands should be doing the same. And if you're just a straight traveler out there looking for great experiences, there are plenty to choose from. So please watch back as I walk through all those tabs and, have fun, travel safe.
And if you want to read out your website again, your contact information, because people who are watching this on Vimeo and in YouTube, they won't have the chat to look through. So if you want to just say your website and your email again for everybody that's watching at home.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give 3 websites. The first website is to the Cannabis Travel Association, which is a B2B association. So if you're a cannabis brand or business, I recommend looking into this. It's cannabistravelassociation.org. The second website is my personal website for my agency. I have an amazing team, and we're small and mighty, and we love what we do. We wake up inspired every day. And that's brianapplegarth.com. That's BrianApplegarth.com. And you can learn more about Applegarth Consultative Services, or Applegarth Strategies, as we refer to it. And we do work with destinations, but we also are increasingly working with cannabis lounges and shops and brands that are now really waking up to travel and tourism as a differentiator for their marketing strategies. The third website that I'm very proud of is the cannabis-trail.com. And that is an attraction that I've been building for years. And it's really gotten a boost in the last year, being surrounded by amazing team members where we work on that. And you're going to be hearing about it a lot more. It's definitely growing and evolving. So I would urge you to check out all 3 of those, depending on your interest.
Love it. Well, thank you again, Brian. This is wonderful. Thank you, Prue, for all of your help on the back end, and for Lisa for setting this up. Thank you all of our audience members for being here today. I hope that we were able to share some information that will help you all become better informed cannabis consumers, and that the information that we share today will help you all find relief and some entertainment and some knowledge on the Cannabis Trail. I hope that you all have a wonderful day and that you all stay safe and well. And we look forward to seeing you in another episode of the Friends of the Farm Lecture Series. Have a great day. See you soon.